Sorry, Mr. Spiro.
Oh, sorry.
Get that out of your way.
I may have to interrupt the prosecutor.
It's always fine when the court interrupts me. Then may I proceed?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. When you got to the scene, Mr. Baldwin walked up to you and said, I was holding a gun. He blurted it out, right?
Yes.
And in fact, he was very shocked, if you could picture Alec Baldwin in a pale state, very unsure of himself. You could say an actor out of character. Fair?
Sure.
Object to the former question. It is Mr. Spiro testifying in the question.
We are not going
Okay.
to do these without this.
May we approach?
When you saw Mr. Baldwin, he looked very shocked. If you could picture Mr. Baldwin in a pale state, like unsure of himself, you could say an actor out of character. Is that a fair description?
Sure.
And he said to you, I'm here, whatever you want to do, right?
Yes.
He said to you at one point, where should I go? Right?
Yes.
And he also pointed out to you who the director was on scene who was hit in the shoulder, right?
I believe so. Yes. I inquired about him.
And he also asked you how she was doing, right? Meaning Miss Hutchins, right?
Yes.
I don't remember you being asked about that on direct, were you?
And you mean asked by the state?
Yeah.
Objection relevance?
Overruled.
So I want to take a step back. The dispatch that came over to your radio, sir, before you got to the scene was a dispatch for an accidental shooting by a prop gun, correct?
I believe that's what was told to me, yes.
Okay. And you've testified to that previously, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the dispatch report, you know that you received that wording, accidental discharge, several times, right?
I believe so.
Okay. So I want to ask you, how come when you described it today in court, how come you didn't include the word accident when you testified before this jury?
I'm not one to say if it was an accident or not. Just there to initially respond to it, and then the detectives determine whether or not it was an accident.
Well, sure, but every other time you've been asked about this, you've said it was an accident. And now today at the trial of Alec Baldwin, when you're talking to this jury, you left that word out. Isn't that true?
Not intentionally, no.
Did you meet with the prosecutors before you testified here today?
Just briefly in the room outside for them to tell me who was in order of what witness.
You've discussed your testimony previously with Ms. Morrissey, correct? Before today?
Just in a pretrial interview, yes.
We've talked about your lapel that was on. It's true, right, that the lapel is actually mandatory,
Yes.
right? And so they came to the officers, passed a law, and told you had to wear your lapel, right?
Yes.
And the way it works is it secures all of these statements, and when you're done wearing it for the day, you go back to the station, you log it in, and then it exists, right?
Essentially, yeah, but it's more complex than that. It uploads on itself.
Oh, it self-uploads so that it maintains itself?
Yes.
Okay. And you then talked a little bit about the securing of the scene, and you talked about crime scene tape going up, right?
Yes.
But as you just told this jury, at the time, you don't know whether this is an accident or not, right?
Yes.
It's not like a crime scene tape is some evidence of a crime, right?
Whether it was an accident or a crime scene is still essential.
And you've been very candid that you made some mistakes at this scene, right?
Yes.
And that you've learned since then about some of these mistakes, right?
Yes.
you've said hindsight's 20/20, right?
Yes.
And you can Monday morning quarterback decisions, but you made them in the field, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've said that based on your training and experience, you know that if witnesses are left to speak to each other, they can taint each other's memories, right?
Yes.
And sometimes that's incidental and accidental, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it's purposeful, right?
Depends on who's there, yes.
Well, if you were with somebody and somebody was talking to you about the 911 call, right? And they kept saying to you over and over, it wasn't an accident, it wasn't an accident. And then you testify and you leave out the word accident. That could be an example of taint, couldn't it?
Sure.
And also, non-witnesses can taint people's memories too. You agree with me?
I guess.
Well, at one point in your testimony previously, you had said that there was a lawyer on the scene that was talking to some of the people that were on the scene.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And if that lawyer told somebody on the scene, I think your understanding is that could have tainted their view of their memory, right?
Essentially, yes.
Mr. Baldwin never asked to speak to that lawyer, did he?
Not to my recollection.
And then you went on and you said, that you had told Mr. Baldwin not to speak to the other witnesses. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And I think you were asked approximately 5 times why Mr. Baldwin was disobeying your orders. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Okay. But in the lapel video that we just saw, you're not going up to Mr. Baldwin or these witnesses, but get out of here. Get out of here. I'm an officer. You got to separate. You don't do that, right?
Nope.
And also in that video, you can see a lot of these people are coming over to Mr. Baldwin, right?
Yes.
One of them comes over and shakes his hand, right?
Yes.
Have you ever seen that in all of your experience? Somebody commit a homicide, and everybody and all the witnesses are on the scene, circling around the person, shaking his hand and talking to him about what happened. Have you ever seen that in your entire career?
No.
And then you went on to say, well, you didn't put him in the cruiser. You didn't put him in the cruiser because your cruiser was being used. Was I guess the reason that you gave? Was that? Did I understand that right?
My patrol unit was being actively used as a post on the other side of the field for a crime scene.
When you say a post, you mean like it goes somewhere else and you put the tape around it? Is that?
The side mirror was wrapped around with crime scene tape.
Uh-huh. You mean there were also another dozen officers on the scene that day that had police cars if they wanted to put Mr. Baldwin in it at any point, right?
Yep.
Okay. And in fact, Mr. Baldwin later on drives himself to the precinct and goes and speaks to the police, right?
I'm not too sure how he got there, but he did get there.
Well, he wasn't under arrest, right?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And so you use this word detained. When Miss Morrissey asked you, well, were you detaining Mr. Baldwin? Do you remember that question?
Yes.
Isn't it true that even today, years later, no police officer has ever arrested Mr. Baldwin or detained him in a police car? True?
I don't know.
The police department, the Santa Fe Police Department, has never arrested Mr. Baldwin.
Not the
Back
Santa
to
Fe
the
Police
form of
Department.
question, asked and answered.
Overruled.
And one of the things that you do as an officer on the scene is you observe demeanor, right?
Yes.
And you spent 10 hours on the scene, I think I heard you say, right?
Yes.
You got to see the people of Rust that day live, right?
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is that you took it as a way how everybody was acting, and that the individual who claimed to have been holding the firearm was still there, that there was the way he was, his demeanor was that there wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say. Isn't that true?
I wouldn't say there was no intention. I don't know the individual's intentions, but his demeanor was sad, upset.
Okay, well, it's not just his demeanor being sad and upset, right? Okay, I'm going to move that to the side. And I understand you're not a mind reader, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. All you can do is look at the people and look at how they're interacting and make your own judgments, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you do that as a police officer to try to figure out how to interact with a scene. True?
Yes.
Okay, and isn't it true that the way you took it, how everybody was acting, and that the individual who claimed to have been holding the firearm was still there, that there was the way he was, his demeanor was that there wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say. Isn't that true?
Again, the wording you're using, I wouldn't say I
Okay.
had any clue of whose intention was what, but he was sad and upset.
Okay, well, let's play. I'm going to play his statement to that effect. Can we cue that up, please, if that's okay with the court? He's saying he didn't say that he did. I'm going to impeach him.
I don't think he said he didn't.
Well, you want me to clarify that?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you claiming that you didn't say that?
Rephrase what you said?
Sure. Dispatch said it was an accidental shooting by a prop gun. So I didn't know if there was any. I took it as the way how everybody was acting, and that the individual who claimed to have been holding the firearm was still there, that there was the way he was, his demeanor was that there wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say, you know.
Again, I wouldn't say I knew what his intention was.
I understand that. What I'm asking you now, okay, is did you in fact say those words that I just asked you?
At what time? The Gutierrez or PTI?
Yes.
I may have.
Okay. You don't deny saying
Yeah,
that?
Your Honor, let's approach
No.
if we can.
Sure. One more time, I'm just going to ask you, did you say that statement that I read?
If you're reading a statement and it says my name next to it, then I more likely said it. I just don't recall when.
And one of the other things that happened that day that I don't think we've talked about is you spoke to a witness who told you that a woman named Sarah was crying and shaking and going through the bullets and saying, "I don't know how it got in there."
Objection, hearsay.
I'm asking the witness if he had that information.
He's making the statement, the hearsay statement is coming in.
Do you know whether anybody at the scene was, before you got there, shaking and going through the bullets and saying, "I don't know how it got in there"?
I don't know.
Okay. If we could refresh the witness with his lapel, and I would ask that can I put it up on just his screen? Okay.
I don't think you can do that.
I would object because that's not proper refreshment. We don't refresh in front of the jurors. That's my objection.
What do you mean?
Well, if we're refreshing,
You know what? We're going to take a lunch break real quick, and we're going to be back at 1 o'clock, okay? Please don't talk among yourselves.
All rise for the jury.
Can you show me how to do this thing?
All right, you're excused. You can move over. And this thing is a battery, and counsel approach.